Hi, I'm Tom, and this is Adult Game Reviews. This week I took a look at A Foreign World by Highborn Tiger. A Foreign World is a weird game.
Weird like cool weird?
Well, kinda. Sorta. Yes.
Not only is this a reverse isekai story, but a pretty clever one. Unfortunately, there are some things that may give you pause when deciding if you want to play it. Before we get into all that, let's go over the premise. You play the 29-year-old operative for a covert organization that is sanctioned by the US government. You are technically retired, but after finishing an off-the-books job, you end up having to bury some evidence in the forest. And it just so happens that a portal opens up and spits out 9 girls. It's very clear that something is different about some of them. I mean, besides their clothes, one girl's flaming eyes kind of give it away. The MC knows what the organization that he worked for is likely to do to these girls, so he pulls some strings to keep them at his house.
Doesn't even make sense, really.
To make sure all these 9 beautiful girls aren't dangerous. There's a lot going on with A Foreign World, some good, some bad, but let's get into the visuals first. The renders are interesting. Some backgrounds look great, and some use the terrible wallpaper with bare walls, don't get me started. There's also some girls that I like personality-wise more than I think they're pretty. This is to say that most of the girls look average. There are minor animations throughout, but nothing special from my point of view. When I tend to play VNs, I really tend to look for the exceptionally pretty or engaging girls. The only girl that really stood out to me was Tracy. She reminded me a lot of Mora from Bear Witness. Very average looking, but I liked her character a lot. I know some people like the girls looking more normal or realistic, and others will have a hard time with it. This is all kind of the same with the audio. The music is very forgettable, and I actually muted it to put on my own. There are ambient sounds that set the atmosphere, but minimal sound effects. Overall, I would say the audio was pretty average as well, if not a little below average. Okay, so this is the make or break section, and that's the story and plot. This is a prime example of a story grabbing me early on. I was fully engaged after the initial events. You find the girls and have to get the girls safe, gain their trust, placate the organization, and figure out how to beat the big bad guy. But after the initial excitement, I began to lose interest. It shifted from the exciting and mysterious beginnings in favor of a slower and more methodical pacing. However, before I get into that, let me talk about some of the things I liked. The reverse isekai story, for instance, is a great idea. Tracy, Lucy, and a couple of the other characters are awesome. I mean, you have a girl that wields a spear with wings. That's so cool. It also doesn't hurt that the MC was also pretty good. There are so many forgettable MCs in so many visual novels, and while he isn't the most interesting MC I've ever seen, he's smart and capable. I do believe that he worked for his skills and used his intelligence to get ahead. I like smart main characters. His intelligence is only highlighted by the big bad. You gain powers from many of the girls. This involves you having to train with each one to learn how your new powers work and what your limits are. If you weren't smart, this would be so much of a drag to read. In many ways, you're a typical MC in an isekai story. Most MCs in isekai stories are kind of Mary Sue's, where they're special and are able to do more than they should be based on zero experience.
Hello, the Jedi.
This all culminates with the 30 days you have to learn and master your powers, or the big bad will destroy the world. The big bad is a true psychopath who is bored and likes to dominate and kill people for fun. However, many of these cool things aren't utilized completely to their full potential. Meaning, I have issues with A Foreign World, and most of it comes from the plot and structure standpoint. For instance, it didn't help that this is closer to a kinetic novel than a choice-based visual novel. There are infrequent choices, mainly focusing on if you want to pursue a particular girl. Normally, I don't usually mind the lack of choices, but with the pacing, it didn't help things, which brings me to the slow pacing. This is a prime example of some devs needing an editor. After the exciting events at the beginning, it slows down to the point where I got pretty bored.
What I wouldn't give for some action.
This is only compounded by who the story likes to focus on. To me, Sue has to be the worst character in A Foreign World. She is the definition of a desperate clinger.
Got a stage 5 clinger.
She has a curse where she falls in love with someone, she cannot fall out of love with someone. And guess what? That happens to be you.
Good, great, grand, wonderful.
There were quite a few interactions with her where I wish she would just go away, but I also didn't want to miss out on anything. This is why it was so frustrating when so much time is spent on Sue. Tracy, on the other hand, is great, but most of the other girls are neglected or take a long time to get to know. You end up having the same conversation over and over with the other girls. On one hand, this makes sense, because the story goes by hour at some points, so in game time it's maybe been only a few days, but for me it feels like it's been a lot longer. There are many conversations or interactions or training sessions that should just be cut out entirely. They don't really add to the story, and it seems like the dev is trying to really emphasize certain points. In reality, I wanted less Sue and more everyone else. Now, I know my opinion of Sue is subjective, objective. Out of the 10 girls total, I wish it was more balanced a bit between them. Now, A Foreign World does something stylistically that will sway your opinion of the game. I had someone comment that they find it unbelievable that basically the best and only person that can help any of these girls happens to be the one person to stumble upon them in the forest. To me, this is common isekai stuff, where there's a bit of fate involved.
This is fate, Brian. It's fate.
That didn't bother me personally, but what did bother me is the pacing. The spicy content, on the other hand, is on the average side, with your options limited early on. I do wish some of the scenes were a bit more creative, especially with everyone having powers, but that's a minor complaint. Alright, so what do I think? If you connect with Tracy or Sue or some of the other girls, A Foreign World is worth it to build relationships. I enjoyed the whole premise. I don't think a reverse isekai is done enough in VNs or games because it can be such an interesting trope to explore. However, all this good was dragged down by the pacing and focus on Sue early on. So for me, this is a wait. I personally want to see if things are cleaned up a bit before jumping back in. However, it's hard for me to recommend this fully or to tell you to pass on. There's some people that I know personally that absolutely love A Foreign World and others who will find it too slow. I tend to lean towards the pacing being a bit too slow. So if you're okay with a slow burn where you get to play White Knight, you'll probably enjoy it. If you can't get over some of the other things I mentioned, I would pass on it. I'll do a full review of A Foreign World when it fully completes. I would like to thank all my backers on Patreon and Subscribestar, and if you haven't seen my video on 5 games I'm not going to play until they're complete, you can check that out right here. Thanks again. Until next time.